Okay, all right. All right, we're going to, whoa, that was louder than I thought it was going to be. We're going to go ahead and start this next session. So if you are wanting to be in the next session, come in or not, whatever you're doing, move around. I think everybody escaped. Oh, we're missing Tao, so we can't start yet. Hold on, hold your horses, girl. We have people on live stream too. Good. Watching the stream, so excellent. Yeah, this is bound to be interesting. I think that would be interesting, and I think that you're right. I think this is one of them that we'll put in here partly because we'd be able to have a really good recorded stream of it. Because I think it might be really helpful to be able to archive it.
Well, this is something that the community colleges will be able to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be university now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do we have some virtual people?
We have, I don't know if we do at the moment, but we have, thus far we have.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the new one, but
We had 10 also on the last stream.
yeah.
Really, that's great.
We have 3 people waiting on this one right now.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Very good.
So, you know, and we'll start as soon as Tao is ready.
As soon as I don't know what happened to her.
She took off. She took off. I guess I can start the introduction. Should I do that, or should I? Here she comes.
There she comes.
All right, Tao is here. So I'm going to take this off again because I can't see over this podium, so walk around the side. Okay, so that last panel was the end of the last panel was a really great introduction to this panel because as we know, as you saw how powerful and amazing study abroad can be for students, while we recognize and as universities and colleges determine that this is a really important, powerful thing to do, we also realize that there are a lot of students who can't actually do this for various reasons. They touched on a little bit at the end of the last, Sarah touched on a little bit at the last session, the fact that they can't actually afford to go, or they have family, they have jobs, they just can't go somewhere. So that's really important to this particular thing because these study abroad, these ability to interact with another culture are so vitally important to a informed populace that we need them to be able to do this. But how do we do this? How are we going to do this if they can't actually go anywhere? And so what's really exciting about this particular case study, and we have, I was just going to say, and we lost one of them again, but she's here, she's back. Okay, good. Is that, you know, despite, we can use technology to address a lot of this. It's not the same thing as actually going on the cart, right? We saw the picture of the person on the back of the Jeep going through we can't do that, but we can have them interact with people of other cultures and that kind of thing. And so it's really, really helpful for students to be able to have some kind of experience. And I'm going to let these guys do most of the talking, but they're all going to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. And we actually have some that have one faculty member who has done a virtual study abroad essentially, and one who's going to. So I'm gonna let them speak to this and take it away. So.
Hey. Oh, yes. Okay, good. Thank you, Christy, for your help. And thanks to our panelists here. And my name is Reed Scull, and I'm with the Outreach School. And with me, we have Pam Ennis from the Anthropology Department and Tao Han from elementary and early childhood education. I do want to recognize the people who are participating online virtually, probably from around the globe. So welcome to you all, and also thank you for everybody attending because it's really inspiring to see so many people who are, you know, celebrating teaching and learning and looking for ways to improve their repertoire of skills and to get inspired. And hopefully through our discussion, you'll get some ideas. But first, before I get started, I'd like to ask you all a couple of questions. First, how many of you have participated in a study abroad class or taught one or taken one? Yeah, I see probably about half of you. Okay. Another question that I have for you, and I know this is a very easy question for some, but how many of you have taught a class or taken a class online or through other distance delivery methods? Could you raise your hands? Wow, that's even a larger group. And so what I'm seeing here from the overwhelming response to these two questions is that we have collectively an opportunity, and that is to design unique learning experiences somewhere around the confluence of distance education methodologies and best practices and study abroad opportunities and best practices. And as an administrator, I become very interested in helping instigate the creation of something called virtual study abroad courses. But let me give you a little background in terms of what's motivating me as an administrator to look into this question. I wonder how many of you have heard of the Institute for International Education. It's a global, really, agency. It's based in Washington, D.C., I believe, and they have a lot of wonderful programs, but one of their initiatives that they have going on right now is called Generation Study Abroad. And it's a nationwide effort to enlist universities to actually double the number of students studying abroad between 2014 to 2020, from 300,000 students to 600,000. That'd be roughly going from 8% of all college students to somewhere in the neighborhood of 15-16%. That's pretty ambitious. The UW campus, also I should note, has not only has an excellent international programs office, but there's been an increase in the number of international students on campus to the point where I think this year we're approaching 1,000 out of the 13,000 that are at UW. The university is a member of something called the ACE Internationalization Lab. When I say ACE, and my wife urged me to not use too many acronyms, so I started spelling these things out. But the American Council on Education is a great research resource for a lot of faculty and administrators around the country. And they've started this internationalization lab, of which University of Wyoming is a member. And they're promoting internationalization on university campuses by supporting universities to create plans for how they're going to use the resources they have, among which are international students and faculty, and also how they're going to internationalize their curriculum. Because as the American Council on Education has said, and you can check out their website just by Googling ACE actually, but they've said that, you know, to be an educated person in the 21st century, we need to have graduates that have had global experiences beyond their immediate neighborhood. It's not only good for being an educated person, but it's also good for employability, because if our graduates, for example, can say that they've had an international experience and actually put that to work and translated it to their profession, they're going to be a lot more marketable. Another trend that I've been spotting is that UW has a lot of distance and non-traditional students. At most universities, distance education enrollments are pretty much flat. We've been able to grow a little bit, and a large measure of that growth is because not only is distance education popular to non-traditional students around the state and beyond, but it's very popular to students here on campus. And so the methods, the methodologies of distance education have taken on a greater degree of importance, but it's also presented us with a dilemma because many of the students who take distance courses, being non-traditional learners, are place-bound for reasons even beyond economics. Sometimes it's family reasons. Sometimes students have children. Sometimes they're taking care of their parents. For a variety of reasons, it's difficult, if not impossible, for them to travel. But yet, how can we provide an experience for them that's engaging and relevant and exposes them, engages them with another culture? So there is a growing field out there. It's very small right now, but it's growing, I can tell you, and literature is starting to develop on the concept of virtual study abroad. And rather than give you a neat definition, there is some variation from university to university. And if you'd like to check out what universities are really working hard on virtual study abroad, I have a resource guide here that's in green. I'm trying to cut back on a lot of things. One of them is paper. And so I won't hand these out. I only have a few, but if you'd like them, you can come get them later. But in any case, virtual study abroad courses have some common components, and I think you'll see this when Pam and Tao begin talking about their courses. But it basically starts with the involvement of two instructors, ideally one from each culture or country, and then follows with a recruiting of two groups of students, one from each culture or country. It takes a lot of recruiting, as we're going to find, and a lot of years of hard work to bring together faculty colleagues and also develop students to participate in these kinds of courses. And I think in Pam's case, we're talking about 4 or 5 years of pretty consistent activity with an academic colleague in Iceland. Another common element of virtual study abroad is requiring that students or designing for students, or maybe actually enlisting students to help in the design of authentic and engaging assignments. And I'm going to be very careful providing a definition of what is authentic and engaging, because there's a lot of excellent teachers here in the audience that could do better, way better than I could. But in short, authentic assessments involve activities that are meaningful to students and to some extent mirror real life activity. Often in a study abroad context, that could consist of things like asking students to develop travel guides for the country that they're about to visit and collect information that satisfies a specific purpose. It might be, in the context of virtual study abroad, pairing up with a student from another culture, interviewing them and writing a biography of them so that students can understand and learn from each other better and use that knowledge as a foundation for other learning activities. But it suffices to say that just like in study abroad, it's very engaging, and the task that that comes to the instructor and the students in a virtual study abroad is to make sure that those kind of assignments are, the assignments in the class are authentic and engaging. Lastly, the use of digital technologies is very important, and sometimes I've seen cases where the technology is shared. The learning management system, for example, in one country is the same as the learning management system in another. In other cases, it's not. More often than not, it isn't the same, but there's some agreement between the instructors and the students about what kinds of technology will be used, whether it's an LMS or social media. I just want to, before I go, and I hope I haven't gone on too long, but I want to mention a couple of tips that I think you'll see, particularly in Pam's example here, and the idea of using common learning management systems, very important. Grading is pretty important because cooperation and relationship building are, to some extent, both the means and the ends in these kinds of courses. And so grading in ways that encourages cooperation rather than competition is often helpful. And I don't know how many of you, I don't even know if this is possible, but have you, Pam, have you graded like pass, fail, or satisfactory, unsatisfactory in courses, or have you generally used grading systems?
I've used A to F grading systems.
Yeah, yeah. There's a variety of ways that you can encourage it, but using grading to motivate cooperation and relationship building is important. And then I think also, since you're using digital technologies in virtual study abroad, it's very important to make very clear communications etiquette and encourage students to give others the benefit of the doubt when they're communicating. And then lastly, whatever kind of virtual study abroad experience that you have, I think it's very helpful if you have faculty from both countries being present in the same course so that they can serve as resources and mediate challenges that occur in cross-cultural communications. So I'll hand it over to Pam, who will provide her example of an ongoing course exchange with the University of Iceland, so you have a better idea of some of these concepts. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you, Reed. Yes, thank you to all of you who have stayed for this session. It's good to see you here. I think what we're talking about are some very interesting possibilities for internationalization and growth at UW, at the community colleges, with our K-12 partners, and with our international colleagues that we're developing relationships with. I'm going to talk briefly about a set of courses actually that I have developed that have involved participation by students actually coming in from Iceland. I started moving my research focus to Iceland in 2008, 2009, was there for a Fulbright in 2012, and used that as a means for beginning to understand their system, which I think has been crucial in helping to develop a program that works, that can be sort of beamed from our school into theirs, involve their students, be understandable, and speak to some of the issues that Reed had mentioned earlier. To start this whole process, I had traveled actually to Iceland, met with colleagues in anthropology, which is my home discipline, met with them at that university during the spring break of 2010. And part of what I wanted to do was, first of all, look for the feasibility of my Fulbright proposal, but then secondly, start to see whether there were ways that UW and the University of Iceland could actually establish a working relationship. Their geographic environment is fairly similar to ours, very mountainous, very much rooted in agricultural background, very interested in the natural world, natural environment. I thought there could be some very strong connections and that Wyoming might be very attractive to Icelandic students and vice versa. That has actually panned out. But I needed to go check that out, so I went in 2010. And then during my Fulbright fellowship that came about in 11 to 12, I used that time to come to understand how courses are taught at the university there, about their grading system, about how students and faculty expect to interact and what they expect from each other in terms of classroom behavior and classroom preparation. But I also used that time to expand my network of colleagues and make connections outside of the anthropology department there, looking for people to sponsor my classes with their students and try to recommend them to others. Now, it took a couple of years, but in spring of 2014, I actually presented a graduate level course, the seminar in linguistic anthropology, which is required of all of our master's level students. Occasionally we get some PhD level students in that as well. And we were joined by one PhD level student from Iceland at that point. And this was a real-time synchronous video broadcast class. So we had to schedule the class at a time that would be sufficient to relate to our Icelandic student, allow her to participate easily around her work schedule and things like that, but also find a point where our students would be awake and with it. So we did. We managed to get that set up. The people at Outreach really helped with this whole management of the video broadcasting system, as did the technology specialists at the University of Iceland, so that kind of connection was very necessary to have in place. And we taught a course over the semester where there were weekly discussions twice a week. We were all meeting. They were seeing Vala. She was seeing our students here. And as a result of that, at least 2 of the students in that course have remained in touch with her, and I know have kept talking to me about traveling to Iceland and perhaps even pursuing an exchange program, a semester abroad, something like that. Part of what facilitates that is the fact that Vala was very candid with them about what the expectations are at the university there, what the opportunities are, and what they would expect culturally upon arrival. And I think part of what's happened with that is that it has provided a groundwork, a foundation, that makes these students even more comfortable to consider this kind of travel. Plus, they already know somebody who's there, someone in the system, and she's been very welcoming and very kind to them about offering assistance. After that worked out pretty well, I developed another course and offered that in the spring of 2015, and this was an upper division undergraduate course. So juniors and seniors here, a couple of master's level students, that is entitled Language and Racism. Not exactly the easiest topics to cover, certainly not the easiest class always to manage and to put forward. And in this one, we had 2 Icelandic students coming in from the anthropology department there. And I made those students interact with UW students in group-focused, topical, thematic assignments in which students were varied among the groups. So the Icelandic students had an opportunity to interact with every single UW student and distant student, because I know we had students coming in from Colorado. They were in group activities, they had to communicate with each other, they had to consider issues of how racism plays out in the various realms, what they think about racism, how it has affected their population. And what they realized in all of these conversations is that things are not the same here in the US and there in Iceland. And that, in a way, kind of challenged some of our resident students' perceptions about what racism is, how it occurs, how it appears, and what we can do about it. The Icelandic students are coming from a culture that is very proactive about this, and some of the students here were rather amazed that you could be. And so that kind of an interaction, I think, really opens some doors for broader thought amongst students here. It also, I know, educated the Icelandic students about how things are done here and what expectations are here for racial relations and history and how history affects current day practice. And so there was a lot of learning going both ways. Out of that, I made sure that the interaction in that course was collegial, it was professional, it remained respectful in all of these conversations, even though we were dealing with a very difficult topic. Interestingly, 3 of the students who took that class on this side have remained in contact. One of them I know is contemplating a year abroad. So she has gotten over that hump too, of seeing this as being a little bit too scary to consider. She's actually working through the process to apply. So making these kinds of relationships, I think, has helped students here to envision going elsewhere. And it's also attracted some of the Icelandic students in. We've had some exchange students come this way as well. Not as many as I would like, but we'll try. At the same semester, there was a colleague of mine in Iceland who was offering a course, the Anthropology of Iceland. It was also an upper division undergraduate class in which 3 students were enrolled. This was an online asynchronous course. And since I was one of the people who was kind of pushing my students to take this class and look into it, they've all kept in touch with me, or I've pestered them about it. And all 3 have actually expressed interest in going to Iceland, meeting some classmates. They mentioned that they had created some bonds with people through this experience. And so again, I think this has worked to lessen the barriers and lessen the perceived obstacles for that kind of travel. Now, some things that I wanted to end up with here are that we need to recognize, if you're going to move forward with building this kind of a program, this kind of a class, that we're asking students on both sides to work across different delivery paradigms, different credit paradigms. And sometimes we may not realize precisely what steps have to be taken to minimize difference in those realms. I'd be happy to talk with any of you about what I did to facilitate learning for the Icelandic students, and also to help students here understand what was being said back to them by the Icelanders, because sometimes there was some miscommunication there. We need to also work at the institutional level, the professional level, to identify desires, wishes, and needs on both sides, because as so many of the panelists earlier this morning said, you can't just come in and impose a process and say, this is how it's going to be. You really need to investigate whether there's a desire on that end. And so some of my earlier work, even though it didn't seem like I was making much headway sometimes, I think it helped with that, because I was checking that out, making that communication happen. And so my Icelandic colleagues are comfortable now with the courses that I'm offering and channeling some of their students into those. Part of that results then is that networks are created amongst the faculty, amongst the administrators, and then also amongst the students, providing information about course offerings, what's necessary to get involved, and what kinds of benefits will result. That, I think, is the key component to making this sort of exchange work. Because if that isn't there, first of all, faculty on the other side are not going to suggest to students that our classes have merit. They may need to integrate them into their major components or their major programs. And they need to know what we're teaching and how we're teaching it before they can feel comfortable doing that, just as we do on this side. The other thing that happens is that students may simply not be made aware, depending on the administrative and the institutional structure at the other side and over here. And so having these networks available that students can plug into, that faculty can plug into, to find out what's going on, what's going to be offered, what content is going to be shared, that's very important. And I think that's a big part of the work that we have to do if we're interested in developing these kinds of programs. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Tao, who will be.
So we're running out of time, so Tao, you have to be fast.
I'll be really fast. So as
the next one starts at 10:15, so.
okay, so Pam was saying that, you know, by doing this work, she
Sorry, can you speak
created,
on for the stream?
she
people?
actually did mention that, that she was able to create this network of colleagues and friends. So that's, I am like one of those networks of friends and colleagues ended up working with her. So Reed was the one who worked closely with Pam about this kind of technology end of it. So when Reed introduced us, we talked about, okay, we're going to sit down and talk about how we're going to create a course that we both share an interest in, such as literacy, language, linguistics, and racism. So now, with that interest in mind, I thought, okay, I'm going to go ahead and apply for grant applications that I am trying to do in Japan, Tokyo, the International Christian University. So I'm planning to visit there in summer and meet with some friends that I have at that ICU University and some of the colleagues my friends have with Osaka universities and discuss what is possible that we can do. But before we actually start launching a virtual exchange programs with Japan, Pam and I, Dr. Innes and I are going to create a course during this winter break. So then once we design a syllabus around that issue of literacy, language, linguistics, education, and racism, we're going to offer a course as a pilot course, hopefully, if everything goes well, in summer 2016 to see how it works within the state of Wyoming. And then hopefully I am thinking to have some Japanese students be included in that course, so that can be a little pilot with Japanese students. And so that's just my little processes that I'm thinking to do. So I'm developing relationships with the Japanese faculty, and I also have a faculty who's already done this, Dr. Innes, on this campus, and we're designing a course together and offering a pilot course here and inviting some Japanese students to be included in there. And that's my steps. And as I talked with Mary Scott, the interim director at IPO, International Office, she was saying that whatever I plan to do as a faculty, I need to go through the IPO office to do follow up a potential, not formally full-blown MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, but have a potential MOU set up with the IPO office. And then I need to keep reporting them what I'm going to be doing, how it's processing, and so forth with the outreach school, and get their help from the technology people at the outreach, and keep informing the IPO how my process goes. And all this information I'm following is what Reed was presenting at the beginning, that COIL model, Collaborative Online International Learning Project, that, you know, core components, what I'm following. It's just basically what I need to say. Thank you. And so I have some books over there. Actually, those are some examples of, you know, children's and youth literature I'm going to use as one project to talk about social issues such as racism. So I have some Japanese picture books and youth literature that talks about how they were treated when they were in the US, as the Japanese people were sent out to a heart mountain in Wyoming, or those issues of racism, social issues. And I also have, like, you know, American books like The Giver, Divergent, Holds, The Hunger Games. So many books we can use as one of the projects. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. So what we're going to do, since we're running over, is what I'm going to ask these three to do is to go, if you have questions for them, to go out into the lobby so the next group can come in.
Oh,
And so please, and please feel free to find them, and we can get the next group ready to go. And it was really great and helpful, and we got it all recorded. So thank you guys so much.